And all is well.
All right, let's go ahead and get started if everybody's ready. It's nice to see a good crowd here today. My name is Angela Robbins. I'm an associate professor of history at Meredith College, and we thank you for joining us with scholarships in this mostly virtual but also limited on-site environment. It's really great to see a couple of folks there in person. This is the second season of scholarships, inspired originally by a Meredith College community and corporate outreach initiative. Scholarships was born out of conversations between my colleague in the history program, Dan Fountain, and me, because we were especially interested in teaming up with Raleigh Brewing Company, not only because of proximity, but also because RBC has the distinction of being the first woman-owned brewery in North Carolina. As a women's college, we recognize lots of potential in joining forces, and Christy Neisted, said owner of Raleigh Brewing, has been a great partner helping us pull these events together. We would also like to recognize especially all the staff at Raleigh Brewing and our colleagues at Meredith College who have been so helpful in promoting and supporting the scholarship series, because it is thanks to their talents that we've been able to bring our audiences quality programming focused on history, culture, science, and of course, craft beer over the past year. Our Office of Alumni Relations is helping plan and market these events. And again, it's great to see so many alums with us tonight. This evening, we're excited to bring you this program on the North Carolina Highway Historical Marker Program. Of course, Meredith College has a historical marker on Hillsborough Street, which recounts the history of the founding of the college and its renaming in honor of Thomas Meredith in 1909. You know, if you're anything like me, you look for these historical markers everywhere you go. I'm sometimes craning my neck to see them when I'm driving. And there's truly something for everyone. So we're excited about this program, which should be informative and fun. We invite all of you to ask questions by either typing them into the chat or joining in the Q&A at the end of the program. And on that note, I will turn things over to my colleagues, Taylor Twine from Alumni Relations and Dan Fountain, who are on site at Raleigh Brewing Company, to introduce our program and our guest speaker. Take it away, Taylor.
Hey there. So welcome to all of the alumni that are joining us online and here in person. We in the alumni office are slowly getting back to normal. We have lots of upcoming programming, including scholarships. We're partnering with the Sports Science Association on Trick or Trot, which is taking place both in person and virtually later this week. We have our virtual alumni book club that takes place each month on the first Tuesday of the month. We have a meet the coach and team with the basketball team coming up. The Black Alumni Collective has an own tabletop talk. We've partnered with the Office of Career Planning to offer an event focused on trends, changes, and considerations in the aftermath of COVID. We have our annual New York trip planned for later in the month. The Young Alumni Board is hosting our annual Afternoon with Santa. And we have several shows at DPAC. And we have tickets too. So we're so excited that we're able to start engaging alumni again and welcoming you back to campus and spending time with you all places outside of campus. So I will now turn it over to Dan to introduce our special guest.
Welcome everybody to the Tavern Room here at Raleigh Brewing Company. It is a thrill to have you all here and more people here in person. So thanks for coming out and joining us. This evening, we're engaging in a topic that I spent a lot of time on, the North Carolina Highway Historical Marker Program, and a good friend of mine and a colleague, Ansley Wegner. Ansley is a graduate of both Chapel Hill and NC State, and she's a veteran, I won't say how long, of the North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources, and she oversees that program that is often referred to almost comically as history on a stick. It's something that gives, our rides around the state a lot of oomph. So without further ado, I want to introduce Ansley Wegner.
All right, thank you very much for having me. Give me just a second to very clunkily get the slideshow ready. Okay, now are y'all seeing that? What do I need to do?
Go share, share.
Easier?
Yeah.
Oh,
So his escape.
okay.
Taylor, can you make her a co-host? Because I am not able to do that right now, it looks like.
She should be able to share her screen. I gave her this.
She's got it. It should be good to go.
All right.
And there we are.
Well, you can hit expand so we don't see her other slides.
Well, and I hit it from the beginning, should it not?
Okay, there you go.
There, is
Got
that
it?
good?
Perfect.
Yay, glad that didn't take longer. So yeah, this is the Highway Historical Marker Program in North Carolina, launched in 1935. We've always operated jointly with the Department of Transportation. They do all the heavy lifting and maintenance as what they can do, which is painting and straightening posts and things like that. And then my office keeps all the records of the markers. We take the applications. I spend most of my time talking with the public about potential topics and things like that. So I'm sort of a one-person show with it, all of my colleagues being in the DOT, but everybody in my office has to chip in from time to time because it's we have 1,681 markers around the state. There's at least one in every county. And with that many markers around, we're generally getting a call at least once or twice a week about a marker that's up that might have been hit by a drunk driver or a distracted driver, shall we say. Or, people just wanting to know how the program works. So I'm always glad to go out and talk to people about how the program works. So that that, for example, almost all applications come from the public. Sometimes people will say things like, with Ava Gardner, when we put that marker up, they said, well, it's about time. Actually, that marker went up exactly the first meeting that she was eligible because we have a 25-year death rule. Somebody has to have been dead for 25 years before they can be considered. And also, if somebody doesn't apply for it, there's no mark, we don't know everything. And the last thing we want to do is go out and tell a community what's important in their history. We, in the past, have done that, and it doesn't always go well. And then certainly with some of the big stories like eugenics or the Wilmington coup, you don't want to go in and put those markers up and say, hey, enjoy it, here's your history. So we really encourage these applications to come from the public. And the one thing I always like to get out of the way first is historical markers are not monuments. And I think if you're sitting in this room, you know the backstory to that. Monuments are literally putting people on pedestals in places of power and honor, like this advanced statue out at the Capitol, where historical markers are sitting on the side of the road, on the other side of the New Jersey barrier up in, Buncombe County. And we like to say they're like museum labels on the landscape. Just giving a little bit of information about history, not praising him. We're not saying that he's, the greatest thing that's ever been. We're just saying, giving you some details about his life. The markers are made in Ohio at a company called Siwa Studios. Standard marker, which are the ones that, like the Meredith College one, have 5 to 6 lines of text with 25 spaces per line, basically a tweet. And the one catch, when people start trying to do this, M's and W's count as 1.5, punctuation and spaces count. So it is, when I say 25, it's 25. We get people trying to do these on their own, and they always come up with these really long things. You've seen one of our markers? There is not that much truth. And keep this in mind. They're 3-inch letters. Something I'll mention later kind of harkens back to this. It's, we are unique in the country with the 3-inch letters. Most historical markers that you're gonna see are like the one in this picture that's kind of covered up by my text. It's really small letters, like that's probably 1.5 inches, maybe 1 inch letter. And there's a whole lot to read on those. I always like to say that the markers tell you the stories that you know, the people, the personalities in North Carolina that you're familiar with. And some of the stories that might surprise you, some of the stories you don't know, like the nuclear mishap near Goldsboro, where we almost had a nuclear disaster when the bombs crashed to the ground with only one safety left. That was, I mean, my whole family was right near there. I wouldn't be here if that had happened, because my parents are from within 30 minutes of that. Obviously, sometimes North Carolina historical markers tell really reprehensible stories. We don't shy away from that. I think, you know, some states, in fact, every state around us and most states in the country require applicants to pay for a marker. They have to pay an application fee. They have to pay for the marker. If the marker gets hit by a drunk driver 2 weeks later, they have to pay for a replacement. We don't do any of that. There's no money involved. We kind of go back to an old motto of our office, and that's history for all the people. We want to be able to tell all the stories. So we do. And you know, I did just mention the 3-inch letters. The Wilmington coup, back at the centennial of that, the historical marker committee, where you weren't on it, you were when this was rejected.
Oh, no.
So
I was on with the approved.
it was, what ended up, they approved a marker about the newspaper owner and you know, losing his paper. They felt like that was as good as they could do on a historical marker, because that's a tough story to tell in 5 lines of text. You know, that the eugenics board marker is tight. That's a really well written marker. We get the story in. If you want to know more, you know, come look at our website. But the Wilmington coup marker, just to be respectful, needed to say more. So that's got 1.5 inch letters. So it's roughly twice as long as a regular marker. Just like anything in state government, we're subject to laws and rules. Like any other public history undertaking, once a marker is approved by the Historical Marker Advisory Committee, we're obligated to keep it up, with the exceptions of markers that are incorrect or in the wrong location. Look around on the screen, and then you can kind of see where I might be going with that. You know, these markers that you see are not wrong. They're not incorrect, and they're not glamorizing their topics. We do sometimes have to change markers when we learn more about the history that's on the marker. The program used to have about 15 or 18 Juan Pardo and DeSoto markers around the state that went with the Swanton route, which was a route that Dr. Swanton came up with that took Juan Pardo much further west than what we know now. Once Fort San Juan was identified and we agreed to put a marker up to it, I convinced my boss that we needed to take these markers down, all of those old Juan Pardo and DeSoto markers. The other thing that you can see here, kind of with the 2 pictures, is the Juan Pardo marker is in all caps. So that means that's a pre-World War II marker. From the 30s until just after World War II, the markers were produced at a different foundry and they looked like that. So if you see a marker that's in all capital letters, you know it's one of the really oldest ones in the marker program. But all those had to come down because they were wrong. You know, we can't have that sitting on a street corner in Highlands saying that Juan Pardo slept here when he was nowhere near there.
That was a good number, wasn't it, like 15 or so?
It was about 15 or 18. I think that the only subject that is more marked in North Carolina, single subject, is Stoneman's Raid.
What is it?
Stoneman's Raid. We at least had 18 markers to Stoneman's Raid. We now don't double mark topics like that. We don't try to mark routes. So if, you know, one of the markers can tell enough of the story and you go find out where all he went. We can't, because you can't mark everywhere. We still get contacts from people, well, Stoneman came through here, we need a marker. But we're not gonna put up any more, and we're pretty much not gonna, if a mower hits one and a truck driver hits one a mile down the road, which actually happened 2 years ago, in 2 neighboring counties, they were about a mile away, same day of the event, they both had a marker. One got hit by a mower, one just disappeared. And the advisory committee voted to not replace either. Because that's if he came through your town, that's of local interest. You know, we're telling the story with the other markers, and that he also came through here becomes local history. So the number of Stoneman's Raid markers is decreasing. I also like to take the opportunity when a marker is broken or when we're flush with money, which that's not the case right now, but we can update markers. It turns out this one was legitimately incorrect. Cornwallis, the man, was not there at Swift Creek. It was his people, but they were under Bannister Charlton. So we replaced that marker with a more informative and more accurate marker. So we like to do this when we can.
I just have a quick question. When you update a marker, obviously you're keeping archival pictures of what it used to be. Is that how you track the story change or the accuracy?
We do. I mean, we have a file for every marker, a paper file, and that's going to track what the original orders said. I have a database, an old access database too. That doesn't track the former words on the markers. We also have the books, the published books, which we had to stop doing because we really couldn't keep up with them. By the time you put the book out, within a couple of months, it would be out of date. And then it would get profoundly out of date as we change what's on an old marker. And this one gets hit by a drunk driver, we don't put it back up. And it's all just a jumble of wrongness. So we're keeping an online printable book now at our website. And I'm keeping that up to date. And you can go in and say you just want to print pages 1 to 50 or get the pages for Nash County and just print that or whatever.
You could actually chip each one of those things to track it.
We have looked into that, but
It's money.
it's money.
Sure.
And that, I can go ahead and mention, presently, the marker program, as I said, we don't require money from the public, but we get $60,000 a year from DOT. But if you recall, right after Hurricane Florence, and I think it was Michael maybe, there were several hurricanes in 2018. And then DOT started having some right-of-way issues and lawsuits. And remember, they were starting to furlough their employees and everything. Well, in our legislation, it's written up that the DOT may give the historical marker program up to $60,000 a year. So they may not given us money since April of 2019. So, we have over $100,000 in maintenance needs right now. We can't do things like this. I'm just having to keep a list of things that need to be changed or.
So you just wanted to punch me when I said.
Right. Like with one money,
Flush.
and people do. There was somebody who came and put QR codes on them all. Well, some of these, like that Cornwallis one, where's somebody parking to go, to go pull over and stand there and read a QR code? there's obviously markers that are in walking areas, and we actually thought about, there is somebody on the DOT board who would like to see us do that, and we thought about a sort of a sample of those in some walkable areas. And she said that you can track when people actually scan them, so we can see how successful it is. Because you do want people to know the rest of the story, you know, the markers can't tell it all. But, you know, we're trying to get more updated, our website, we're trying to get transferred to a less clunky format. Maybe we'll get there. The word is that the new legislation, if this budget ever passes, is going to say the DOT shall give. And the House budget said $100,000. So my fingers are crossed that that is what passes. That would
Make the shall over the money.
But we'll take the shall any day, because they need to be obligated.
So a question, use JS at all?
We do, at our website, which is www.ncmarkers.com, we have a page about every marker. And up at the top, there's a map, and it says view GIS map.
Okay.
And you can click on that and you can see where that marker is and kind of pan around and see where others are. Right now, it's clunkily mobile friendly, so that you have to use the binoculars when you're out, but it'll show you markers that are nearby. So it's not great, but they promised us this, we're gonna try to merge with the state library. And we're gonna get taken into NCpedia, if you've used that at all. And then we'll be in whatever that format is. I don't know my
Sure, yeah.
things. I'll have to learn it at some point, but we'll be on their platform. And I think it's gonna be more functional. Good thing I have a great beer.
Excellent.
This is another one where some folks informed us that Mosley Hall was not 2 miles east. There was nowhere we could move this marker to make it correct and be visible. Our markers have to be on state maintained routes. So it wasn't gonna work. Again, it was at a time where it had a little bit more money. And, you know, the thing that was kind of mind blowing to me about the original marker was that it's profoundly uninformative. The thing that everybody that works in the state archives at least knows about is Edward Mosley's map, the 1733 Mosley map. So I wanted to feature that as, you know, the big punchline at the beginning. So I think it's much more important that he published a map that we still use today to inform us about, you know, that period, rather than that he was acting governor in 1724. So this is one of that I'm really proud of us being able to update it and make it better. This one actually came to us as a class project. It was a 1951 marker, which is early for, you know, to be honest, the marker program only marks the most notable African-American people in North Carolina. You know, they weren't to dig in deep for the really cool stories like we do today. But Charles Chestnut had a marker. It's kind of not very informative. So a class came to us with some language suggestions, and the committee approved replacing that one just on principle and making it way more informative and better. I think that we really did that. And that's a tight marker. They had to go really small on the years of his life, because you just don't want to call him Charles Chestnut. He was always Charles W. Chestnut. So in order to get all that in and to get 6 lines of text, which you really needed, it's tight. But it's also good. I like to see a marker that's full and you're not wasting space. We've used every space possible. This was one of my pet projects in the office. I was really pleased when we were able to replace this one and give them back their names as the title of the marker. So that was an early marker, again, 1940, but in about 2017, I want to say, we put up the replacement that is a little bit more respectful, I think. This one was really interesting. I don't think anybody in our office was even aware. I had an African-American man, blind man, call me one day and tell me that there had been a marker that H56 had been in front of his school, and that it was the last thing he could remember seeing, but that now it no longer mentions that it was the campus for the Black students. It used to, when I pulled the file, it used to say, you know, Negro campus of the Governor Moorhead School, and then in like the 60s, it stopped saying that. It just said branch of, and it didn't even say that it was the first state-supported school for African American blind and deaf students. And that's really important. So we replaced it, and you can't see it in this picture, but he's standing there. He's the man standing there right beside it, and I'll mention to you too that a lot of people don't like hearing it, but when we take down an old marker, we break them up for scrap because we don't want people to think of them as artifacts. They're not artifacts, they are museum labels on the landscape, and when they're no longer doing their job, they just need to be in the scrap pile beyond use of hanging on a bar or something like that. And because there is one that's even better doing its job on the side of the road. So this one has no official use, but this man asked for it and said he could touch, he would be able to touch it and remember being able to see. And that was very heartbreaking, but I had to tell him no. Because even the school wanted it. We had multiple people want this old retired marker at that time, but we have to let them go.
I remember that conversation when Meredith got its new
Yes,
marker.
yes, y'all want that.
I was entrusted with that request, and I
No.
kept that. No.
Even though you're a
We're
great
good
friend of
about
the
that.
program, you don't get a marker. And that said, I have one sitting right by my desk, so. Yes.
You said like H56 or something like that. What are those letters?
Yeah, so it's kind of tragic that they didn't do that at the same time that DOT got all of their divisions, because I have 14 DOT divisions in North Carolina. But those letters are random chunks of counties. They're just districts that were done by the marker program. So that's entirely our designation. Kind of, it starts in the Northeast, comes down and then goes west. So the A's are in like Edenton and Northeast, and the B's kind of work their way down to Washington County and Carteret, and then you've got the C's down in Wilmington, and then you kind of start pushing this way, and they go through Q. And then the number, this is a difficult one, the number should be the number that it wasn't. So A22 was the 22nd marker in A district, which is really only meaningful to us, and it kind of helps you date them. But when my boss, who used to be the manager of this program, took over, he decided to go back, and if we take down all those Juan Pardo ones in the West, well, then we reuse those numbers. So it's kind of messed up the whole numbering system, because sometimes you have a really new marker, you know, that's number 23 or something. But I don't do that anymore, because I just like to keep the folders in order so that we can find information on them if we need to later. So it's not very exciting. It's just 22nd marker in the A district. But that said, and it was just the anniversary yesterday, Edenton Tea Party Day. This was another one of my hobby horses, kind of like the Ang and Chang bunker. The Edenton Tea Party was not a tea party. They did not meet in a woman's house. And I was horrified that we were, you know, continuing that myth of North Carolina history. So we made that marker way better just a couple of years ago. Early and influential political activism by women. I think that's way better than saying these women met for this party at this Miss King's house. So I think it's sort of a lesson in how powerful word choice can be. You've got 5 lines, 5 or 6 lines, make the best of those words. So in the summer of 2020, the office started hearing from people who wanted us to take down markers that were in their communities, or rewrite them to tell more truth. This marker was kind of sad, really. An older couple lived in the house where this marker sat, but it wasn't the Vance house. But apparently everybody thought it was, even though it says 350 yards southwest, people were stopping and taking pictures of their house. And they were afraid after the George Floyd events and the Black Lives Matter protests that people would harm them or harm their property. So they wanted this marker moved. We were actually able to do that sort of an emergency session of just said, okay, if we move this a block away with our committee, and they said, sure. It's still roughly right. We want to rewrite this marker. When we do get more money, it's on our list to change it to, we would never say historical museum now. That's just not, that's a waste of space. We want to say that Zebulon Vance was, under house arrest in Statesville. We want to tell the truth there. And I think the community's okay with that. So we want to make that more informative. We've actually got another one that I don't have a slide about it, but we have 4 or 5 markers about Jefferson Davis in North Carolina, and they're called Jefferson Davis. And they all just sort of say slept here in April of 1865, except for one that's more recent, because it got hit by a mower or something like that. And we replaced it, and it says, fleeing the fall of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis and his cabinet slept in the woods nearby. That's a little bit more informative, April 65, way more informative. That one tells the story, in theory, if one goes down, that one is telling the story enough and they can not go back up. We've had one community has asked us to remove it. One community got mad when I did remove theirs temporarily for the Avett Brothers mural dedication, because it was right in the middle of the mural. Like, there was nowhere that you could stand and take a picture of the mural without Jefferson Davis slept here. And so I had it taken down temporarily for this dedication. Well, the post crumbled when they pulled it out of the ground, and we don't have any money. Well, that community, oh, I'm sorry, that's my phone. But that community flipped out and really wanted us to put it right back up. They were threatening to fire people or get people fired, try to get people fired. And it's truly just something I do every day. I have markers taken down for construction. It's just run of the mill business, but this post broke, which made it kind of messy. And it turns out that it had been there so long that the road is no longer state maintained. So in theory, we can't even put it back there. And then if we can't put it there, it's wrong because it says here, it's up here. So it's kind of a messy one.
Yeah.
We'll have to deal with that at our next meeting.
You're the
So
lawyer president, I think.
yeah, we're gonna have a legal counsel.
Is it grandfathered in as the sign? If it's not, if the state maintained road goes away, it's grandfathered in?
If it, right, yeah, like if it's there, and then the trouble comes when the DOT didn't even realize it when they went and pulled it up. And then we also heard that was part of the furor from the town was you came onto our property and took our marker. And it just kind of, we can't just move them around that much, and because then they'll be wrong, and we don't have that kind of money. So yeah, they just kind of stay there until there's a problem, and then sometimes we need to move them. Finding the right place for them is sometimes kind of tough. I think I put a slide about that too. But what I mentioned earlier about the 3-inch letters. What do you kind of notice about these markers?
Brown. Yeah, we don't.
Right, and like they both are totally Confederate stuff. They're both Confederate Army.
Yeah.
They're not getting requests to take markers down. Everybody's reading them. So in a way, I feel like we're doing a really good job we are presenting a community with their history, the good and the bad. And you know, it's starting conversations. You know, you've got a community wanting us to remove a marker because it says something about the Confederacy. And then 45 miles down the road, you've got a community wanting a marker, you know, wanting people fired about the temporary removal of a marker about a Confederacy. So it's kind of appropriate to the times. But we actually had a meeting with the Virginia marker people to say, what are you doing about all this? This is a mess. We don't have that problem. And so we started thinking about it, and when people are driving by, they can't read them. So yeah, you know, here, the word Confederate is painted over. If they even thought they didn't know that much about North Carolina history, they'd have painted over some other stuff. But they got the word Confederate. Luckily, this doesn't cost us much. This is just a matter of sandblasting it off and doing some painting.
How often does that happen? Just in general? Public editing, what's called.
It's probably happened 5 times in the last year. Before that, it might happen once every other year.
But still thousands of markers.
Right, right. It's not often at all. And, you know, sometimes they're just shot with guns, and that's not. because they don't-
Sometimes that's just.
But my theory has always been, and I still stand by this, when people do this, it's because they don't like the marker. And they want everybody to see it and see that this is not okay. When people really like the marker, that's when they take it. You know, I have a lot of people who contact me around, you know, markers disappear. And in one day, I had the Ella Baker marker go missing. It was actually in a ditch because it had been hit by a mower. I had this Stoneman Dre marker get hit by a different mower, you know, halfway across the state.
You gotta get better mowers.
Yeah, those mowers they felt bad about it, so they propped it up against the New Jersey barrier, and somebody drove by and was like, cool, I love Stoneman. Or, you know, I love me some Confederate Army kicking Stoneman. So they stole it. Ella Baker lay in the ditch. We were able to get that one back. Here, but you know, on the same day, those 2 markers, I had people from the east calling to complain that the right-wing people had stolen their history. People in the west calling to say that Antifa had stolen their history. And it's a mower. It was mowers there, mowers there. And so when they go missing, you know, it's because people love the story. And it's when people don't care that they sell it to a scrap shop. Back Friday, I had a marker. The mayor of Maysville went down to a scrap shop to buy something and found a historical marker that was broken. And, you know, we didn't even know about it. So somebody just got it off the side of the road after an accident because it was broken and took it to the scrap shop because they were like, you know, first post road in years. And I still kind of stand by that theory that if they like it, that's when they steal it. It's not because they don't like it. They got it in their garage. They've made a coffee table out of it. They like that history if they've taken it.
I remember we recovered one from some undergraduates in a nearby institution, unnamed.
Yes, you did.
But because they had it and then posted it on social media, so.
They broke it off.
Yeah.
It was really wet. It had been really rainy. They pushed it over, stepped on it and broke it off, snapped it off, took it back to their fraternity house and then posted it on Snapchat. And then, so we knew who had it. We had our attorney send them a letter requesting for it back. And, or not, actually, they dumped it in a park a few days later. We asked for the money to repair it. And they sent us $850 in small bills wrapped in that letter with no other comments, not signed in the US mail. I mean, they just passed the hat.
Yeah.
We got to pay for it. So yes, that was a good one. We also had a marker recently traded for a set of tires. It was the UNC Greensboro marker, had been missing for 2 years, and a guy pulled in to get tires like 3 counties over and had it in the back of his truck, and the guy's, that's really awesome. And he said, I'll give it to you for some tires. And then the guy gets it and says, I think this is stolen. And he called the sheriff's office and we got that back. So there's a lot of fun stories like that. So this was kind of interesting. The Kitchen descendants wanted all of these markers changed, not taken down, but changed to include their involvement in white supremacist campaign and disenfranchisement of African Americans. You know, that's really complicated. These markers are not wrong. A person wouldn't get a marker, you know, to say that they're racist. You know, huge racist, governor from 1909 to 1913. It's complicated. We're not sure how to deal with their requests, but we'll have some long meetings ahead to talk about what can we say, how can we say it. In the meantime, we've revised the online essays to reflect that truth. We have told all the goods on these men in their online essays. We've also sort of started a systematic program of going through and we've done all of the governors and all of the senators and revised them to include any white supremacist connections or racist behaviors, their treatment of slaves, ownership of slaves, anything like that. Because that's where we do have the flexibility to update things. With 1,619 markers, you can't change them all as history changes, or what we know about history changes. This was one that I sort of alluded to earlier. There's just, there's nothing wrong with this marker. It could be better written. It absolutely could be written to be more informative and better, but it's not wrong. And he deserves a marker. At the end of the day, he's a person in North Carolina history that would get a marker because he did important things. And what do? They don't want it in their neighborhood because it says that he was, a lieutenant general in the Confederate States Army. So these are tough questions that we have to deal with. The Thomas Dixon marker doesn't say anything glorifying him. It's truly just did these things, wrote this book. But it's been the target of vandalism over the years, and now that community wants it moved or taken down. It was really poorly placed in front of the Cleveland County School office. It seems like it could be better placed than that. But with 1,500 feet north, we're kind of limited as to where we can move it. So again, this is one that we have to think about. We don't want to forget the history, though. He was from there. We need to remember this man. We own this guy. He's North Carolina's, and for better or worse, we need to remember him.
I'll tell you, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
And so I would fight to keep that because it's information we need to know.
Right.
And Birth of a Nation is a great movie.
It's a huge deal. We're not saying it was a great movie.
I don't
We're
know,
saying-
but it was at first.
Right. It was terrible.
But still.
But we need to know that somebody from, a mile down the street wrote that.
And that's why too, when I have these conversations with people about erasing our history by taking statues down, statues glorify situations, I think you said.
And they're not informing you.
This is, what did you call it?
A museum label on the landscape.
museum label on the landscape.
Right.
And everybody says, well, put that stuff in a museum.
Right,
That's what we're doing.
right, and this doesn't belong in a museum because it's not doing anybody any good in a museum, and that's why we are not artifacts. They belong on the side of the
Glorification,
road,
It's information.
right, because they're not, it's the complete opposite of a monument.
Right.
Because we're gonna say the bad stuff too, if they're written in
Right.
modern times. You know, we're trying to be truthful about them. And you know, like here, this marker has been up since the first year of the marker program. And, you know, all of a sudden, the people who had the High Hampton Inn named for this man want this marker removed. They haven't contacted us directly yet, but they've been making noises about it.
So if like that last mayor and city council and people want it removed, is there a process that they have to go through?
So yeah, there is, we had to, you know, go back through our administrative code and everything, and it literally says markers. You can request to have a marker removed or changed if it's wrong or in the wrong place. So we're bound
Sure, yeah.
by wrong, incorrect, or incorrect location. So is it wrong? No, it's not wrong. Would we like, you know, would we like to keep a database and update them when the next drunk driver does hit that? Which obviously no drunk driver has hit this marker. It's been up since 1936. But, you know, when these markers get damaged, can we have a list of, you know, or in our database, update this to tell, you know, to tell the truth? Yeah, we can do that. Of course, there's nothing else to say about Wade Hampton.
So basically, like towns have no rights.
No.
It's the final say is really with.
It's with the advisory committee that Dan has sat on a couple of times now. It's their decision. I don't have a say in it. They will decide if these markers should come down. And, you know, the ones, whether or not to put them back up. But yeah, I mean, the DHL one is so interesting because, you know, that we had to meet with the town council and the town of Davidson, with the mayor, the town council, talking with us about this marker and why they didn't want it. And it made the Charlotte paper. It was a really big deal at the time. It's since kind of died down, but we haven't stopped hearing from them.
Is that who the library is named for in NC State?
It's his son, isn't it? I think
so.
I think it's his
Okay,
son.
I just didn't know if the
Right.
university had the.
You know, and then that's a whole different thing too, is the buildings being named for people, and a lot of colleges are changing those things. Or, you know, Julian Carr.
I went to Julian S. Carr Junior High School, so I understand.
There you go. I mean, you know, if it wasn't for the Silent Sam stuff, probably nobody would blink at Julian Carr.
However, he gave all the money for East Campus and did that and asked them to give that man back.
Right.
And he founded the suffragette movement. He gave a lot of money to the suffragette movement in North Carolina. And he was one of the founders of NCCU. So you've got a whole
It's a
lot of
complicated history.
complicated history.
You know, we put up the marker about, I have such poor recall when historians should remember things better. Polly Murray, which is right there by
Yes,
Julian Carr's
yes.
old, it's right near this marker. I mean, those two markers are very
Yes.
close together. And around that time, somebody came in and they were like, oh no, we work in a building that he built. You know, we're fine with, I still think that marker could be better written with his marker. I don't think I have a picture of it. But it's, you know, it says he was a leader in the National Sons of Confederate Veterans. There's probably other things to say than that. That one was unveiled with a Confederate flag about 20 years ago. But, you know, the towns, you know, the towns really wants this gone, but then, you know, some people in the community really want it up. You can't, it's really complicated. And I think at the end of the day, our administrative code says we can take it down if it's wrong or if it's in the wrong place.
I don't think that's the right way to look at it.
And then the way we're dealing with the marker that, like the Stoneman's Rate that have been hit by vehicles and then stolen, that's a marker that we would have to spend $1,860 to replace. Well, that's against our current rules, which is we don't double mark a subject. So we don't need any more Stoneman's Rate markers, so we're not gonna replace those. And that's, so we can, our attorneys have said we can apply modern rules when we have to replace a marker. So if it goes against our rules, we don't have to replace it. For example, like if one of those kitchen markers got hit, there's two to WW Kitchen. We don't do that anymore. So if one of those got hit, we would just not put it back up. If both of them got hit, we put one back up and have it be a little bit more informative. But it's kind of, we're going to have to get into the weeds with it. And at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of people upset with this, but it's kind of the way we have to work, or we'd be taking down these markers all the time and rewriting them. At the end of the day, they're doing their job, and if we get people to our websites so they can learn, more of the details, then we've really done our job. And then, finally, we just like to say that it's a really popular program. It's pretty much a 40-hour week job for me. I don't do much of anything else anymore. And it's a way of directly, connecting people with things that happened near them, events that happened near them, people that lived near where they are right now. And I think it's an important program to keep up.
Did you talk at all about the history, like how the marker program started?
It really was it came about at a really popular time for marking things and putting up tablets, as they called them. There were a lot of these bronze tablets and stone tablets that were going up around, and they decided that they wanted to have something uniform and controlled by the state, rather than like the DAR and the UDC putting up random stuff, that they really wanted to just be able to say, these are of statewide, and that's kind of our big cardinal rule is statewide historical significance rather than local. If it qualifies for statewide significance, it gets a state marker at no cost to the applicant. But we were kind of modeled after, I think Virginia was the first one that started doing markers real close, around maybe 32 or something. But then, they take money from the public. They have probably 5,000 markers, and if one gets hit, they just kind of put it on a list of, would you like to sponsor replacing this marker? And hopefully it'll go back up if somebody wants to pay for it.
Is that why, do we use the same company that we've always used in North Carolina, or do you contract it out?
No, and that's been really complicated in the last year. We've always, since right after World War II, when we changed from that all caps company that went out of business, CWA Studios in Ohio has been doing ours. They do almost the whole country. Any marker program, it's these markers. They just have about 15 different styles. And DOT always did all the ordering, and I guess DOT has really flexible ordering, purchasing setups, and they were just able to order them right before they stopped giving us money. They decided that they're just gonna give my department $60,000 or whatever it's gonna be at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then I will do all the purchasing. And that's kind of really complicated. Like my department wanted to put it out to bid and all of that kind of stuff, because that's the way we operate. And that was a big old mess, because that could have some company come in and not be able to produce these markers that look like this, or not be able to fix these markers when they've been fixed. And we had to go through a lot of explaining to get sort of an umbrella permission to order from this company still, but we're going to be able to, thankfully.
Ansley, one of our online visitors has a question about, is there a large backlog of requests at this moment?
So there is and there isn't. I basically started about in the fall of 2019, we were pretty much realizing that we were not gonna get money anytime soon. And we suspended the program and stopped accepting new applications. If people really want to get it off of their hard drives and off of their desks, people are sending it in, and I think I've got about 9. In a typical meeting, we have 10 to 18 or 20. 20 would be a max. I do expect that at the next meeting that we'll be able to accept applications, we're probably going to have way more than max, because there's a lot of people that I've talked to that are still planning to apply. I've joked that we're going to have like a weekend at, the Grove Park Inn or something like that for the market committee, because it's going to be so much business. But we're still going to be suspended for at least another year because, like I said, we have $100,000 in maintenance. So even if DOT gives me $100,000 next week, it's gone. Because we feel like we need to put in place all the markers that have been approved right before we start taking in new applications and considering new topics. We really need to make sure everything that we, that should be up is up.
My colleague is wondering, Angela Robbins is wondering, what is the process for wording or text, and who decides and how? Sometimes you don't want to know how the sausage is made. It's a very arcane art. I'll let you explain it.
It's like, it's a word puzzle to me. You basically, I read through the essay and we sit down. It's usually me and one other person. I'll usually try to get down to the basic thoughts, and then it's a matter of, trying to avoid hyphens, trying to use really powerful, good words to make the most of that space that you've got. And then you talk through it, you make sure you've got all of the important points, and count it out. There's a lot of counting, I have to count out loud. I can't do that quietly or I'll lose my count. But I think it's truly just an art. And then, we come up with 1 to 3 potential inscriptions usually. And then we present them to the advisory committee, and the advisory committee are the ones that decide on the final wording. And sometimes that can take a while, Sometimes it's just, you start really working through those words.
We can haul over one single verb
Right.
or a adjective, and
Right.
it takes.
And then there was, when it became important to stop calling a person a slave and say that they had been enslaved. Well, that takes up a lot more space.
Right.
And but we really strive to get that in now, but it just changes the way we write them. But the advisory committee has the final say.
I lost count of how many Meredith texts we sent
A
you.
lot.
I remember. Yes, it was dozens. So.
Do you know if every southern state, you mentioned Virginia, is every southern state wrestling with this?
I don't think so. Because their programs are operated so differently. People aren't reading the ones with the little text.
Right.
People get a marker if they pay enough money. So in Georgia, you pay $2,500 and you're going to get that marker if it's correct. And here, you're going to get a marker if it's something of statewide historical significance and it's correct, and it keeps within the rules of our program. We're not going to say we're not going to mark another Civil War battle. We marked them all, but if something were to come out tomorrow about an important thing that we have missed, we're not going to say no to that. There are some things that we have to limit. I wonder if I think I could get to a different slideshow. I have another slideshow. There's probably not time for that, but there's so what was I saying? The different states.
Right, in the South.
Right. And then, can't remember what I was gonna say.
It's a Prevagen moment, I like.
I'm there.
Boy,
I'll be that guy that has 3 questions.
Okay.
The first one's very quick. Ladder University needs a marker. We've got to do that. Second one is, you mentioned 40 hours, or can you describe a little bit about what your job is? Is it a paid job? I'm curious.
Yeah.
What you do. And then is it Dan?
Dan.
How important is it to have an advisory board that sticks to its guns, especially in this environment, to make sure the information that goes up there is accurate?
So I talk to the public a lot, yeah, about potential topics. Oh, I know what I was gonna say now too. Because one of the things I get a lot from the public, can you mark this school? Can you mark my grandfather? Can you mark my church? It's not often that a school or a church or your grandfather rises to statewide historical significance. So that's, a lot of times I'm having to talk to people, you don't want to offend people. Your church is important to your community. And I want to tell you how you can mark that, with the local marker. I help people write texts for local markers and things like that. I spend a lot of time talking with DOT divisions, tracking down accident reports, talking to insurance companies, trying to get insurance money. Over the years, we didn't used to do that. When I took over the marker program, and I took over in 2014, around 2015, I started thinking about it, making phone calls. And since then, I think we've gotten about $60,000 maybe in insurance recovery, which is good. Unfortunately, I'd say 80% of the time now, it's an uninsured driver or lapse policy. So it's kind of lacking.
But your role is with the DOT?
My role is with the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. I'm the only person, I'm in the Office of Historical Research in the Office of Archives and History.
Okay.
And most of my colleagues are doing things like the Civil War Roster Project or the Colonial Records or, historical research for whoever needs it. And I mostly do the marker program. I get help from all my colleagues when it comes time to writing the essays that we put online, things like that. But a lot of my contact is with the public and the DOT and just answering questions. And what I was getting ready to say, why I wanted to pull up another slideshow is, there are a lot of things where if there are a lot of examples of something, Rosenwald schools, there's over almost 900 Rosenwald schools in the state. That's an important story. We can't mark them all. I get a call probably 3 or 4 a month. We want to mark this Rosenwald school in our community. We just can't mark them all. So we were really lucky that a few years ago, we were able to determine the first one to be completed. And that one was in Chewan County. And that one was marked with another one of those long text markers that tells the general Rosenwald story and then about 4 lines about that particular school. And it can sort of be changed out for any school. If you want to use this marker, you can take that, the first 8 lines and then sub out about that particular school. So I have, I field a lot of questions from ineligible parties and just try to, redirect them and help them figure out what they can do. There's also a lot of really neat other marker programs out there now, and I'm trying to connect people to those. There's in my department, but not my office, it's the North Carolina Civil Rights Trail. It's funded by the Rosenwald Foundation, which is, Pomeroy Foundation. It's a fabulous nonprofit out of New York, and they do several marker programs. They're paying for the Civil Rights Trail, but they're also doing one called Hungry for History, which is about foodways. That's kind of new, and I'm really trying to encourage people to apply for that. They also have one for Votes for Women, the National Votes for Women Trail, the historic canal. I actually had a canal to be rejected a couple of years ago. I got them to the Pomeroy Foundation just in time for a round to be completed. And I saw that marker this summer. They were approved and it went up, and it's down there, the Harlow and Clubfoot Canal, and down heading over to Beaufort. So I think markers are really important. I don't think ours are the only markers. We can't tell all those stories. So I love seeing other programs. So you think it wouldn't take that long, but I somehow spend 40 hours a week. And is it paying? Sort of. It's public history.
And I'm curious.
Sure, no, I think the advisory boards are vitally important in that process. And I will say, and this is not just blowing smoke, the staff does an excellent job of making sure that the advisory board is briefed on the law and the process and the language and the practices. So when we get in there, I've been on that committee 10 years out of the last 15, I think. And I'm no longer, but
Through December,
through December.
but we're probably not. But you're still on it.
Didn't know that, but good to know. I learned something. So they do a good job with that. And I would say that, you know, they are human. And I've seen once that I would say that there was 80-year-olds in a room crying, moved people in a way that I think was probably not in keeping with our records or with our goals. And that's the only time in 10 years that I can say that I saw people's knees buckle on an issue. And it was an emotional one, not a controversial, you know. But the point is, they do a good job, and I think it's vital. And it's important for us to have these processes in place so that we do a good job. And more importantly, we're accurate on our history.
Yeah, and I appreciate it.
Sure, thank you. Any other questions? Let me try to keep it to a tight hour, so we're a little over, but that's all right. Any other questions
I just
from?
had a quick one. So how many people sit on the advisory board, and then how do you actually get on the advisory board?
So it's 10 history professors
Okay.
from 4-year colleges or universities from around the state. And for the most part, we take suggestions from outgoing members as to who might be good. I try to find subject specialists, like Dan's rolling off in December. I've been trying to find somebody who knows a lot of church history and religious history, Southern religious history, because it's really helped. You know, we have a lot of, I can't stop everybody from applying for a church or a minister. So we have a lot of churches and ministers, and it really helps when somebody can speak to the context. Labor historians, Civil War historians, you know, somebody to say that general or that lieutenant or whatever, that colonel's not important enough. You know, he does not rise to statewide significance. There's 35 more guys like him out there that you're going to get if you mark him. You know, we need good subject specialists, Native American history, you know, African American history. We just try to make sure all, you know, a lot of broad topics are represented on the committee.
We've been encouraging things like business and science that have been less smart. And so having some specialties in these areas are important.
Like one time we had an application, inventors are kind of something that communities get excited about, somebody who's invented something. And there was a guy, were you on the committee? But it was like a guy that invented a cash register of some sort, a calculator. And out of the blue, there was one of our historians done a lot of research on that, and that was kind of one of her things. And she was able to say, "Oh yeah, everybody was inventing stuff like that and patenting it." Yeah, that was there's tons of people like that, and that really helps us with context. Because sometimes you just don't know.
Any other questions for Ansley?
Stop sharing my screen.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Please feel free to hang around for another minute or two. Ansley, if you have time, if we have folks that maybe wanted to just ask you a question, but they weren't necessarily comfortable asking it in front of everybody, we like to do that when we can. So we will stop the recording in a moment and give you a chance to just kind of speak one-on-one with people if they do have other questions. So thank you so much, Ansley, Dan, all of you who asked questions, enjoyed in the conversation. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And mark your calendars for next month's program on women in the craft beer industry, which will be just after Thanksgiving on November 30th. We hope to see you all then as well. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.